Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I never thought a single evening could unravel everything I had built in my life. My name is Michael, 38, and for the past 12 years, I had lived in what I thought was a marriage built on trust, laughter, and quiet understanding. My wife, Emily, was everything I admired, clever, vivacious, and always the life of the room. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our little rituals, and for the longest time, I believed those were enough to keep us anchored. But life has a way of exposing cracks you never notice until the structure collapses. It all started with a wedding invitation that Emily insisted we attend. It was for a college friend, Olivia, someone I had met only a handful of times. I wasn't thrilled about it. Weddings always reminded me of the couples who seemed untouchable when young, only to fade apart quietly later. Still, I agreed. I wanted to show Emily I supported her friends, that I cared about her happiness, and maybe, in my own quiet way, preserve the delicate balance we had. The night of the wedding, Emily seemed unusually excited. She spent hours getting ready, more than she ever had, fussing over her hair and dress. I complimented her as best I could, sensing the flutter of nervousness beneath her smiles. Her laughter was lighter than usual, sharper in a way that I couldn't quite place. I dismissed it as excitement. Weddings did that to people. They brought out a side of them you rarely saw. At the reception, I stayed close to Emily, smiling at her stories and laughing when she did, feeling that small spark of connection that had kept us together all these years. But as the evening progressed, I noticed subtle changes, glances lingering a little too long in one direction, smiles that weren't for me. And then there was David. Emily had met him years ago, once at a friend's gathering, but I had never considered him anything beyond a casual acquaintance. Yet tonight, something shifted. She spoke about him with a warmth I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. Her stories, her laughter, the way she tilted her head when listening to him, all seemed like a language I didn't understand. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking, that I was reading into friendly gestures that had no meaning. But deep inside, a small, insistent voice whispered that I wasn't imagining it. Later that night, as we drove home, Emily's chatter was lighter, almost giddy. She spoke about how fun it had been, how David had told a joke that made her laugh more than anyone else there. I nodded, but my stomach churned. I wanted to ask, to confront, but the words got stuck in my throat. Part of me feared the answer I might hear, the confirmation of the unease I couldn't shake. The next day, Emily left early for work, her energy uncharacteristically buoyant. I stayed behind, brewing coffee and replaying every moment in my mind. Every laugh, every glance, every pause now carried a weight I couldn't ignore. By afternoon, I knew it wasn't just a fleeting fancy, a harmless crush. The truth had settled quietly, like ink seeping into water, and I couldn't unsee it. She had already begun to drift, subtly, irreversibly. For days, I watched the changes. She texted more, smiling at her phone with a light I no longer shared. She laughed at things I didn't find funny, recounted stories that didn't include me, and slowly, the warmth between us became a memory I could barely grasp. I tried to talk, to bridge the gap, but her answers were polite, dismissive, careful. The intimacy we once shared had evaporated, replaced by a polite distance, a barrier I couldn't cross. It wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no fights. Just an absence that screamed louder than any argument ever could. I realized that the person I had married, the woman I had trusted with my life, had already made her choice. And in that choice, there was no room for me. I spent a sleepless night in our bedroom, staring at the ceiling, imagining how different things might have been if she had looked at me the way she looked at him. Every memory I cherished now felt like a delicate glass ornament, beautiful but fragile, ready to shatter with the slightest touch. By morning, I understood something crucial. I couldn't fight for someone who had quietly stopped fighting for me. So, without confrontation, without argument, I began to prepare myself. I packed my belongings carefully, deliberately, not in anger, not in vengeance, but in clarity. Each item I placed into my bag was a step toward reclaiming the dignity I refused to leave behind. The letters, the photos, the small mementos of a life once shared, all of it went into boxes. Not for her, not for anyone. For me. When she came home that evening, radiant and smiling, I was ready. I didn't speak. I didn't plead or beg. I just slipped out quietly, leaving a note on the counter. I love you, but I can't stay where I'm invisible. Goodbye. The note was brief, but it carried the weight of months of unspoken truth, the sorrow of a man who loved fully and silently acknowledged the inevitability of loss. Driving away, the city lights blurred past, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. I wasn't running from love. I was walking towards self-respect. The realization was sharp, piercing, but liberating. The woman I had loved so fiercely had chosen someone else, and in choosing him, she had unknowingly freed me from the slow erosion of my own worth. That night, as I parked in my friend Daniel's apartment and unloaded my bag, I understood that endings are not always violent. Sometimes, the most profound acts of love are the ones that allow you to walk away with grace, to preserve the integrity of your heart, and to face the next chapter without regret. The next morning, I woke up in Daniel's spare room, the quiet of the apartment almost deafening. My thoughts kept returning to Emily, to the way her eyes had lit up when she laughed at David's jokes, to the subtle warmth in her voice that had been absent for months. I couldn't deny the sting, the sense of loss that cut deep, but alongside it was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I had chosen myself. I decided to take a walk, letting the cold morning air hit my face, forcing my mind to focus on the world outside my grief. As I wandered the streets, memories of our early years flooded in. The first apartment we rented, the late-night conversations that went on until dawn, the silly fights over who left the lights on. Each memory was a reminder of what had been beautiful, and yet each one also highlighted the inevitable truth. The bond we had shared had quietly unraveled, leaving me alone in a house that no longer felt like home. By the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily, short and hesitant. "Michael, are you gone?" I stared at it for a long moment, feeling the weight of 1,000 unspoken words between us. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say, nothing that could undo the choice she had already made. Silence, in this case, was my answer. Over the next few days, I settled into Daniel's apartment, though my mind never truly rested. I went through the motions of work and daily life, but every quiet moment reminded me of what had been taken, what had slipped through my fingers without drama, without confrontation, yet with the force of inevitability. Emily had chosen a path that didn't include me, and I had silently accepted it, reclaiming my dignity in a way that words or arguments could never achieve. Then came the call I had been dreading. It was Daniel, his voice sharp with a mix of concern and curiosity. "Hey, man, did you see Emily at the cafe yesterday?" he asked. I froze. I hadn't expected her to reach out so soon, to step into the same space I occupied while I was still unraveling the quiet grief of abandonment. I asked him what happened, tried to keep my voice steady. She was there, alone at first, then David joined her. They were laughing, touching. Everything that was once ours now laid bare in front of me, Daniel said, his words deliberate, almost cruel in their clarity. I closed my eyes, letting the scene play in my mind. I felt a pang of envy, of heartbreak, but also an undeniable sense of relief. Watching from a distance, I realized something fundamental. I no longer belonged to that world. I had exited gracefully, silently, and in doing so, preserved the last shred of my pride. That night, I sat on the balcony, looking at the city skyline, thinking about the future. I could feel the weight of the past months, the betrayal, the distance, the unspoken rejection, lifting slowly. Each breath reminded me that I had chosen my own well-being over the illusion of marriage that had long ceased to exist in any meaningful way. I realized that sometimes love is not enough. Sometimes, even devotion cannot bridge a gap that has widened silently over time. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to regain its rhythm. I reconnected with friends I had neglected, picked up hobbies that had lain dormant, and started to rebuild a sense of self that had been buried under years of quiet compromise. The pain of Emily's choice remained, a dull ache at times, but it no longer defined me. I was learning that walking away doesn't always mean failure. It can mean survival, self-respect, and the courage to face the truth without excuses. Then came the final encounter, the one that would seal the chapter completely. Emily arrived at my old house one evening, unexpected, her expression a mixture of regret and confusion. David wasn't with her this time. She approached cautiously, as if stepping onto fragile ground. "Michael, I just wanted to—" she started, but I cut her off gently but firmly. "Emily, there's nothing to discuss. You made your choice. I made mine. That's the end of it," I said, my voice calm, unwavering. She looked at me, a mixture of frustration and disbelief in her eyes. But she didn't argue. She couldn't. The truth was immutable. I had already walked away, silently, without a word, and in that act, I had taken control of the only thing I could, my life. As she turned to leave, I felt an unexpected sense of closure. There were no dramatic confrontations, no explosive fights, no rain-soaked realizations. Just the quiet, stark reality of two lives diverging. And for the first time in years, I felt unburdened, free to move forward without the weight of resentment or unanswered questions. That night, I unpacked the last of my things in my new apartment. The emptiness that once seemed terrifying now felt like a canvas. I could choose how to fill it, who to allow in, and what to protect. The memories of Emily, the wedding, the silent heartbreak, they would always exist, but they no longer dictated my future. Sometimes, life forces you to accept that love is not a guarantee, that devotion cannot compel reciprocity, and that dignity is preserved not through argument but through action. I had chosen action. I had walked away, silently, with every ounce of self-respect intact. And in that quiet departure, I discovered something profound. Endings are not always tragic. Sometimes, they're the beginning of reclaiming your life, piece by piece, step by step, heart intact.